Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Other Epic Story Reading. This is the show that complements my vlog where I talk about writing, editing, world building, tips and tricks. If you're interested in that, I'll supply to a link right up there. If this is your first time here, please go back and take a listen and watch the earlier chapters. It'll help make sense of everything. Today we're in the midst of chapter 3. We're following the character of Frank Elias. Here we go. From there, he worked his way around the town pavilion and into the social district. It was a place that seemed as foreign to him as the end of the world. A shameful place, as his father describes it. It was a place where men go to turn their pity into guilt and their sins into piss. In another of his father's lessons, Elias was told that alcohol was humanity's way of betraying their bodies. The liquor forces them to do what they do. To a boy, that sounded frightening, but to a man, he was tempted to taste the drinks. Perhaps a glass would calm him, reassure him, and gain him some confidence, but his father's word penetrated like a hatchet through lumber. Somehow they all believe it is the solution, his father had said. They believed that by filling their bellies with beer, they would accomplish something greater than their life. They trick themselves for a few hours, and then they pay for it in the morning. Only fools take part in such a disgraceful act, Frank. But you must know that this world is made up of fools. Until the day smarter men rule, we must keep our opinions to ourselves. We must know where we stand. His father taught him many lessons about disputes and territories. Knowing where to stand was a model that worked well for Harmon Elias, but all his son knew at that moment was that he was standing on something unpleasant and sticky. The tavern was dank and dark, and somehow in the midst of autumn, the humidity was strangely warm. It was as if the pub itself had its own climate and ecosystem, an atmosphere of sweat, alcohol, and disappointment. The new surrounding was unsettling for Elias. He didn't belong there, and though nobody looked up to acknowledge him, that simply confirmed it. He took another step in and allowed his presence to be felt. If they felt it, they ignored it with ease. He cleared his throat to gather the small crowd's attention. "Hello," he began as the patrons and the bartenders looked over. "I am Frank Elias. You may know my father, Sheriff Harmon Elias. He passed away 3 days ago, and now I'm taking over as the law. It was my father's wishes for me to serve my town and protect its citizens. I hope I can find—" "That rotten old Harmon has passed, has he?" came a grunt from the back of the room. "It was about time. Now his boy has taken over as the law? That is just too precious." "You," said Elias, pointing at the bitter old man in the bag. "Do you have something to say? Please do stand and share it all with us." "What are you doing here, boy?" asked the bartender. "Why do you feel it would be necessary to march in here and begin oppressing my customers?" "My father has told me stories about your customers," said Elias. "I don't want them to feel they get any new treatment just because my father is gone. I want them to know that I stand by all my father's protocols and policies. I want them to know that any unlawful acts will be punished." "Boy," said the bartender, "why don't you let me govern my bar? Let me run my business in peace." Elias swallowed his pride and felt the harsh, critical stares of their drunken eyes. Few began to sputter with chuckles, and others began to mingle, saying things like, "The Elias boy is barely out of his diapers and he wants to take over for his father. What a wonderful joke to start the day. Perhaps he should go back to sucking on his mama's teats. Oh, forgot she passed as well. Good morning indeed." "Please leave without a ruckus, boy," said the bartender. "We don't wish to hear any more about you or your dead father. You should let the past go and study a real trade to help the town." "Yes," snapped a toothless man. "Let the drunks be drunk. There is no crime to say we can't. There is no crime." "As long as there are drunk, miserable men," said Elias, "there will always be crime. If you savor your life and respect those around you, I suggest you respect my authority. And me. Whatever makes you happy, boy, said the bartender, trying to suppress his laughter with the rest of those present. Now please, you are very entertaining and all, but you're a hindrance to my business. I don't respect you, spat the old man. You don't serve the people. Elias stared down the old man, but he could not compete. The old man was blind, and the murky whites of his pupils looked at him as if he was seeing all the insecurity dooming his soul. The boy stumbled as he stepped backwards. The crowd erupted in laughter at the poor boy's embarrassment. Elias brushed himself off and adjusted his father's hat. I serve those who need me, said Frank with the remaining air of confidence. Those people are not you. Good riddance, someone muttered as Elias left the bar, flustered. What Elias didn't know was that deep in the shadowy alcoves of the quaint tavern was Aaron Delane. He was hunched over his mug of beer with the type of manner that no one dared to disturb. He had stayed up most of the night drinking alone in that very spot and wasn't aware of morning's arrival. Day changed nothing. He was still mulling over the same dilemma, although, to him, there was no dilemma at all. The decision was made. All he had to do was find a way to execute his plan. All night long, he had been thinking of a way to kill Henry Gonright, the man that was having an affair with his wife, Jennifer. Delane had a long suspicion of his wife's unfaithfulness, but now it had all come into fruition. He was hiding amongst the outer curtains of his estate while his beloved spouse thought he was in the shops working. Henry, dark and muscular, snuck into his home, into his room, and into his bed and soiled the essence of his life. An unforgivable act deserves an unforgettable punishment. And Delane, in his fury, was composing the perfect one. Murder, the silent voice spoke in his head. Kill the dark-skinned freak and kill that dirty cheat. He smiled at that prospect and took a sip of his drink. But how? He whispered to himself. Nobody in the bar paid attention to his rambling. How will I do it? He mulled over the idea of taking Henry and his wife. Stabbed him in their sleep, he thought. It would be a cruel and messy death for a cruel and messy secret. No, the backlash would be too obvious and too alarming. He did not know where to put a blade for fatality. He could not risk it. Suffocation, of course, he thought. He could simply sneak up behind them and choke them with a sharp piece of fencing wire. No, it was not a practical kill. It would leave too much behind the attack and the actual death. There was too much room for error, and it made him very uncomfortable to commit it as a first choice. So he continued to sip his beer as the sun rose without his approval. He began to grow more and more frustrated with his plan until the moment the young sheriff entered the bar. The boy must have been taught to know his enemies. Delane smiled at Elias' appearance. He figured it out. The Elias' pistol. The weapon that every man and woman in North Bourbon feared was now in the possession of a child. Delane took another sip of his drink to calm himself. He stroked his beard and bit at the idea of taking the little boy's gun. He was swift with his hands, and he knew it. A simple nudge can easily act as a distraction to release it from its holster. It seemed too simple. So Delane ran over the plan 10 more times in his head, subjecting it to all its flaws. That boy is smarter than you think, said the voice. Sheriffs don't raise children that get shoved around and distracted in the streets. Delane knew that he could not simply shove the boy and run off with the pistol. No, that was a dying wish. He had to play a role in all of it. He must approach the boy for assistance. He would be eager. He would undoubtedly accept. Then, only then, when Delane wins the trust of the new sheriff, does he then take the gun and bid him farewell. Too many things can go wrong, but he no longer wanted to dwell on what-ifs. One way or another, he would get away with it. one way or another, he'll achieve his goal, and he'll taste the sweetness of a bitter revenge.